Hello, and welcome to early voting training with Ramsey County Elections. My name is Kim, and I will be talking us through an overview of the operations of an early voting location. There is also an in-person training that provides instruction on using the statewide voter registration system to look up voter records and create absentee records for voters, as well as optional labs to continue practicing the database processes. Resources include a manual that details everything you need to know to run an early voting location, and duty cards that provide simplified steps to carry out the daily processes. To start, we'll review some early voting details specific to Ramsey County. Next, you'll learn the particular roles that election judges fill during the early voting period. And last, we'll talk about additional administrative duties like curbside voting, ballot return, and campaigning in the polling place. Before we get into any of that, if you live in Ramsey County and are eligible to vote in this election, you will be able to cast your ballot at the early voting location where you're working. If you are a head judge on Election Day, we will deliver your Election Day materials to your specific early voting location prior to Election Day. Let's get into the overview of early voting. This year, we'll be opening the early voting locations listed on the slide. All locations will be featured on an interactive map that will show where voters can cast their ballot and drop off ballots that were mailed to them. The interactive map also displays current wait times at each location. The head judge will monitor and update wait times with the assistance of the team. These are the specific dates and times early voting locations are open for the upcoming election. Our main office at Plato is open from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. weekdays, but also has extended hours during the early voting period. Those hours are listed in your manual and on the elections website if you need to provide information to voters. On the first day of early voting, we'd like you to report to your location an hour before the location opens for voting. You'll see the exact time listed here on the slide. For the subsequent days, please report 30 minutes before the start of voting. On your assigned days, please also allow time for closing procedures and organization after the location has closed to voting. Any voter who lives within Ramsey County can vote at any of the locations within the county. Paper ballots are distributed for the precincts most frequently served by your location, as well as a ballot-on-demand printer to print all Ramsey County ballots as needed. You will be administering the early voting process with a laptop computer using a centralized database called the Statewide Voter Registration System, or SVRS. Early voting locations operate a little differently from polling places on Election Day, as this activity falls under some of Minnesota's absentee voting laws. This picture illustrates the flow you'll see in an early voting location. Voters enter, are greeted by an election judge, and instructed to fill out the absentee ballot application. Once that's done, they proceed to the SVRS judge. That's the person who's working on the computer. The SVRS judge determines if the voter is registered or non-registered. They enter the voter's information from the absentee ballot application into the database and to identify which ballot the voter should receive. The ballot is retrieved by an election judge, initialed by two judges, and given to the voter. The voter then proceeds to a voting booth to complete their ballot and casts it into a ballot counter. An assistive ballot marking device is available for any voter to use. So that's a general overview of early voting in Ramsey County. Now we're going to talk through the specific election judge roles you'll see in each of the locations. The first is the greeter judge. They're there to welcome the voter, provide direction if the voter's dropping off mailed ballots, and assist voters with the absentee application. They will help voters locate their sample ballots if a voter requests, as well as connect the voter with an interpreter. The greeter judge is also responsible for managing any line that forms as voters complete their applications. This is an image of the absentee ballot application. Every voter needs to complete the front side of this form before proceeding to the SVRS judge. The boxes in gray indicate required information. You do not have to worry about the election dates in box 1, as the voter is there to vote with you that day, regardless of what box they check. They are required to provide their name, residential address, date of birth, ID number, and signature. The next role is the SVRS judge. The first step is to search for the voter's record in the database using the information they provided on the absentee ballot application. This search determines if their registration is current or if they need a new or updated voter record. If there is an existing record, verify the information, specifically their name, address, date of birth, and ID numbers from the application against the voter record. If there's not a voter record or the record needs to be updated to reflect the voter's current information, the voter will need to go through the Election Day registration process. For all voters, an absentee record is created in the database that will show whether this individual was registered or non-registered, that they voted in this election. Instruction on how to do this is given in another training. On the back side of the absentee ballot application is the voter's certificate. The voter should not complete this with the greeter judge, as they'll need to complete it when they're issued their ballot. If the voter does sign it early, they can sign their name again, next to or below the original signature. The voter must use the same voter's ID number on the back as they used on the front of the application, and the signature next to the X is critical. Once the correct ballot is retrieved, give the voter basic instructions on marking the ballot and where the scanned ballot counter is in the early voting location for the voter to cast the ballot when they've finished voting. If the voter needs to register because they do not have a voter record or need to update their information, they will do that with the SVRS judge. The judge will first view acceptable Election Day registration documentation, which we'll discuss on the next slide. It's very important that the SVRS judge do not enter the absentee application information into SVRS or proceed with the voting process until the voter shows acceptable documentation. Once it's clear the voter has the right documentation, entry into SVRS can begin while the voter completes the voter registration application. The voter can but does not need to complete the name and address portion of the application, since a label will be placed on those lines. The SVRS judge will complete the election judge official use only section at the bottom of the registration, indicating the registration documentation the voter used, marking in one column only. As stated, the voter must first provide the required proof of residence before they can register and vote. We provide pads of the yellow sheet shown here for your own reference and to provide to voters if they must leave the location to obtain proper documentation. Registration requires strict adherence to the approved documentation, and voters must be able to provide one of the proofs. There are no exceptions, no matter how official a document may look. Registration is a detailed process, and if you're new to this, we encourage you to request assistance from your head judge or more experienced judges as you learn it. An example of this yellow sheet is included in the early voting manual for your review before voting begins. You will see on the sheet above that the most straightforward documentation is a valid Minnesota driver's license ID or tribal ID. The majority of voters will provide one of these forms of documentation. For voters without a valid ID, there's a second group of options that includes one of several types of photo IDs in the first column, paired with one of the documents listed in the second column. These documents may be shown on a phone. And finally, in the third group are options like using a registered voter in the precinct who can confirm the address at which a voter lives, it's called a voucher, a notice of late registration sent by Ramsey County if a voter's registration arrived at our office after the cutoff date, or even previous registration in the precinct. This is commonly used by voters who move within their neighborhood or apartment building or change their name without moving. Again, we encourage you to review this sheet before you begin serving in the early voting location and to ask questions of your fellow judges as you learn the process. We've discussed the non-registered process for voters who need a new or updated voter record in SVRS. However, there is another type of voter who will need to go through the non-registered process, even if their voter record contains up-to-date information. This is any voter who has a challenge marked in their voter record. In this slide, you see an example of the red letter alert in SVRS. There are several types of challenges which are listed in the early voting manual for your reference. If a voter asks, you may also use the manual to help you explain the challenge to them. All challenges require the voter to go through the non-registered process. 3 challenges, incarcerated, citizenship, and guardianship, require the additional step of asking the voter a set of questions to ensure they're eligible to vote. The questions are listed in the manual and will be administered by the head judge. Except for the 3 challenges just spoken of that require questions, you just follow the same non-registered process for challenged voters as you do for voters who require a new or updated voter record. The next judge in the process is the ballot judge. They retrieve the correct ballot based on the voter's residential address. The ballot judge determines the voter's precinct by looking at the SVRS screen. The SVRS judge can also call it out and then retrieve the correct ballot. As you can imagine, there is opportunity for error here, so we want you to audibly verify that the ballot is for the correct precinct. Both the SVRS judge and the ballot judge can acknowledge, yes, this voter is from Roseville Precinct 4. Yes, the ballot I have in hand and am giving to the SCRS judge is Roseville Precinct 4. Two judges must initial the upper right corner of these ballots. We're asking that you do not pre-initial any ballots. Just initial the ballot as part of the transaction with the voter. The two sets of initials should be provided by the SVRS judge and the ballot judge. If a voter wants a new ballot, typically they've made an error, but a voter can exchange a ballot for any reason. The ballot judge can manage the process of spoiling that original ballot by placing it in a designated envelope and reissuing a new ballot. In early voting locations, we also may need to spoil a ballot in SVRS. This type of spoiling is done when a voter is mailed a ballot but now wants to vote in an early voting location. It requires an SVRS process that we discuss in a separate training and provide a duty card for. But be aware that the term spoiling a ballot can mean two different things. The ballot judge can spoil any ballot that was issued in the early voting location. Voters tend to go to the early voting location that is closest to them, so we provide pre-printed ballots for precincts closest to the location. However, we may not provide pre-printed ballots for some precincts that are quite a bit further away from your early voting location. If you don't have a pre-printed ballot for a voter, you will use the Ballot on Demand printer. This device can print ballots for any precinct within Ramsey County. We'll provide each head judge with hands-on instruction for using the printer and will include a duty card in the supplies. The head judge may assign someone to inventory the ballots and print a few ballots to ensure busy precincts are stocked. Another position is the equipment judge. The equipment judge is stationed near the ballot counter to assist voters who have any questions or need help casting their ballot into the machine. This judge should not allow any voters to leave with a ballot. They also should not allow any voter who came in with a ballot they received in the mail to cast it into the ballot counter. Mailed ballots may be recognizable because they have been folded and have not been initialed. Mailed ballots should be placed back into the signature envelope and sealed if the voter wants to drop it off at the location. But the voter should be informed they can spoil that mailed ballot and vote through the early voting process. The equipment judge will also make sure I voted stickers are available for voters. Next, we have the head election judge, who manages the location. They manage staff and administrative duties. They are the main contact with our office, and they are responsible for completing forms that they will return to Plato along with the ballots and applications at the end of the day. Head judges may ask another head judge to make the daily return, but please let our office staff know if this occurs. Head judges are assigned by the elections office and will contact their location's team of judges before the start of early voting. If you have interest in serving as a head judge in the future, please notify the elections office. Our office also provides a variety of support for the early voting location. Staff or specially assigned election judges may visit the location and provide support on site. We also have a hotline judges can call with their SVRS-specific questions and a number for additional supplies that will be picked up by the head judge during returns. Now we'll discuss additional notes and other tasks that are performed in the early voting location. In odd years, the City of St. Paul uses the ranked voting method for their mayoral and city council races. Ranked voting is not used for the school district race. Note that the ballot for St. Paul municipal races has a different layout than races in any other jurisdiction. Special instructions and signage will be provided for ballot marking. Some of our precincts are split into two school districts, and you'll need to be aware of this when one or more school districts have a candidate race or ballot question on the ballot. For example, if a voter lives in Arden Hills Precinct 1 on the School District 621 side, they'll get a different ballot from voters who live in Arden Hills Precinct 1 on the 623 side. Ballot judges must be aware that during school district elections, there will be some precincts with these splits. The school district will be indicated in the ballot header and on the label. The ballot judge can check with the SVRS judge for the correct district. Sometimes, when there is a school district split, one part of a precinct may not even have an election, while the other does. The highlighted precincts have a school district split with two different ballots this cycle. For some elections, especially in odd years, there may be more than one option to choose from in the election cycle drop-down menu in SVRS. The correct selection will depend on the precinct in which the voter lives. You will be given instructions and other aids if this is the case. In odd years, be aware of other circumstances. Some ballots may be one-sided, other ballots two-sided. Translated sample ballots may be arranged by ballot style instead of precinct. The head judge will get more details about the particulars for this year. Now let's talk in more detail about the ballot return process. As a quick overview, mailed ballots can be returned at any of the early voting locations by the voter or another person who legally is called the voter's agent. Your job as the election judge is to review the signature envelope for proper completion. The head judge can assign someone to focus on mailed ballot return if we have enough voters who want to take advantage of this service. Along with their blank ballot, voters in Minnesota receive one of two signature envelopes that are mailed to them when they request their absentee ballot. The registered signature envelope will have a label at the top that lists the voter's name, address, and precinct. You, as the election judge, will need to verify that the rest of the signature envelope is completed properly. You're looking for the voter's ID number, their signature, and the witness information. The witness can be any U.S. citizen or a notary and must view the voter's blank ballot before recording their name, title if a notary, and their signature on the envelope. When you are receiving a dropped-off absentee ballot, you'll want to verify all information is completed properly on the signature envelope. The other type of signature envelope is for non-registered voters. The label at the top has the voter's name, address, and precinct. The voter needs to write their ID number and signature, and the witness needs to write their name and signature and provide a title if they are an official or a notary. It is also required for a non-registered voter that the witness check the box indicating which Election Day registration documentation they saw as proof that the voter resides at the address listed on the label. If one of the boxes is not checked and we take the envelope, the voter's ballot will be rejected by the absentee ballot board. If the voter is returning their own ballot, they don't need to complete any additional paperwork. If the signature envelope, registered or non-registered, is missing voter information, the voter can fill it out right there before submitting it to you. However, if the envelope is missing witness information, we can't accept that envelope because it's incomplete. However, the voter can vote with you that day at the early voting location. They'll need to fill out another absentee ballot application and have their mailed ballot spoiled in SVRS, but they can be treated like anyone else and go through the early voting process. If the ballot is returned by a person other than the voter, they're called the voter's agent. They will need to fill out additional paperwork called the absentee ballot agent delivery log. They also need to show you, the election judge, their ID. An agent can return ballots for up to 3 other people, and that rule applies for the entire election. So the agent cannot do 3 one day and 3 the next day, just 3 for the entire election. If an agent requests to obtain a ballot for someone else, you can instruct them to contact our office. This is a service we provide, and it's specific to the week before Election Day. They will need to visit the Plato office to carry out this process and should call first for details. Here is an image of the agent delivery log. The agent will need to complete this for each voter for whom they are dropping off a ballot. So if they're bringing 3 ballots back, they need to fill in this log 3 different lines. They write the date, their name, their address, the voter's name and address, and provide their signature. If the agent brought the voter's ballot and the signature envelope is missing some information, it cannot be accepted by the elections office. So you want to encourage the agent to return the envelope to the voter so they can complete it properly. If the agent insists on leaving it with you, even though you know it's incomplete, you can take it, and the elections office will contact the voter to let them know of their voting options. During the early voting period, a voter can vote curbside, meaning they stay in their car. We'll provide signage specific to your early voting location. The head judge will be notified the voters outside waiting for service. Voters can also return their mailed ballot outside from their car. If a voter calls, the head judge will alert another judge to bring out the absentee ballot application. Once that's complete, the judge will bring it to an SVRS judge who will look up the voter in SVRS. If the voter is not registered, the election judge will return to the vehicle and view the voter's Election Day registration documentation before the SVRS judge processes the application. If the voter is registered, the SVRS judge will immediately process the application and obtain the correct ballot. At this point, 2 judges of different major political parties will bring the application, the ballot, a secrecy sleeve, pen, and I voted sticker out to the voter. Once the ballot and materials have been brought to the voter completes the voter certificate on the back side of the absentee application. Next, if the voter is not registered, they complete the voter registration application. Then the voter can fill in their ballot. You want to ask the voter to remain at the location until a judge returns to tell them the ballot was cast successfully into the ballot counter. Election judges can assist an unlimited number of voters during the early voting period. When assisting with activities other than marking a ballot, such as completing an application or providing language assistance, law allows for only one judge to assist with that activity. We ask you only help as much as you are requested to by the voter. If, however, you are assisting a voter with marking a ballot, you will need two judges of different major political parties. You will need to mark the ballot according to the voter's direction. Enter the voting area and remain with the voter throughout the process. Be sure to direct questions and information to the voter, not to others with the voter. You may use a voter's completed sample ballot as direction on marking the ballot for the voter. A voter may choose anyone to assist with marking a ballot except for an employer, an agent of their employer, or an officer or agent of the voters' union. Assistants may also help with any other part of the process, including completing an application or language assistance. That person must stay with the voter through the process and leave with the voter when they exit the location. An individual cannot linger within the early voting location. They must be there to vote or to assist another voter. No campaigning is allowed inside the location or on the property of the building. Voters may wear political clothing as long as it does not contain candidate names or political parties or words and phrases from questions on the ballot. We've reached the end of the early voting training. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. Otherwise, ask your head judge during the early voting period. Thank you for being part of Ramsey County Election Judge Team.